Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're reacting, having a discussion from a video from A Shiny Slyveon. Title of the video is DBD Can Be Exhausting. So the original video will be linked in the description to watch the original video, so I recommend doing that. With that being said, the video is saying that DBD can be exhausting, and I completely agree, but I want to hear the points that A Shiny Slyveon has to say. So let's get into it.
I was interviewed by the fake Bennett about my thoughts on Deathslinger and the state of the game for Dead by Daylight, and I said that I think that Dead by...
I would love to have a conversation. I've watched a couple of fake Bennett's, like, very long videos, and I would definitely be interested in kind of having a discussion about Chucky or otherwise, you know, anything. It'd be great.
About my thoughts on Deathslinger and the state of the game for Dead by Daylight, and I said that I think that Dead by Daylight is generally in a good spot until I played these games, which were going to be for a commentary video that was going to come out today. That really made me realize what actually is the most difficult about playing Dead by Daylight as a content creator, and that is specifically that this game has peak hours, which is a bit of a weird thing to say, but if you're not playing for your region specifically in the hours where after 5 to 6 p.m., generally speaking, the mix of matches that you get tend to be pretty rancid in quality and don't typically make for good videos. So for example, in this first game,
He's 100% correct, and I think I've gotten comments about this in the past before talking about this same topic, but it's completely true. There are times where it's better to play DBD than others, especially with just, as he says, match quality. Sometimes you'll end up getting cheaters, you know, just for some reason, you know, you'll get a lot of them. Sometimes you'll get like just dedicated 4-mans gen rush, or you get bully squads, or you get like certain things depending on the hour. And I've seen it myself. Like, the other hours will probably be fine, right? You're like, okay, just normal casual matches, you don't really have to work as hard, and those are definitely more just fun overall to play, because a lot of the time we're not getting on the game just like to sweat. But I want to hear what A Shiny Slyveon has to say.
I took forever to find the survivors on Gideon Meat Plant. Down coming at the cost of 2 gens, and even though we do have Surge, just not gonna have a lot of the presence necessary. The good news is that most of our gens are downstairs, and when I eventually did find them, I missed a couple of shots, I hit a couple of shots, but these survivors were very clearly coordinated and knew how to play against Deathslinger, because this Nicolas Cage would pre-run and pre-leave me all the time, as would pretty much everyone else on the team, aside from this poor Sable that I ended up killing eventually. But the strategy of pre-dropping was used pretty heavily here because we were on the Gideon Meat Plant, we were on the game. Now, as the game wound down, I was playing my favorite build, which has coup de grace, rapid brutality, surge, and gearhead for information. And in this game, as it wound down and got down to the final gen, there were 2 gens that were very close to each other, one downstairs and one upstairs. And because I had surge, every time that I got a down, I would be able to blow both of the gens up simultaneously and keep setting back the progress. But the funny thing was, every time that I actually got a hit onto a survivor, they would leave. They would go off to a different corner of the map, reset, but then they wouldn't come back until they knew that my terror radius was a safe distance away. One of the characters as well, the Orella, had Overcome and Lucky Break, and in this kind of indoor map where you can easily break line of sight, that was extremely aggravating to play against. And
so I'm glad that A Shiny Slyveon is sort of bringing some awareness to this topic, because it is quite difficult to go up against a myriad of different combos, especially depending if you are playing a lower tier killer. And I would consider Slinger to be pretty low tier. Maybe not exactly the D tier, but maybe at least like a maybe C tier, I would say. But anyway, this combination alone, especially on a map like that, which surprisingly they weren't sending themselves to the map. So not only are you going against a difficult combination of perks but you're also going against a team that actively refuses to engage in the only interesting aspect of the game, which is to be in chase. So it is relatable and very difficult and tricky. All in one. Just a nice package all wrapped up in a little bow. Seeing how that sort of affects everybody. And it's great, at least for me personally, to know that I'm not the only one that's seeing this. It's good to see that other people experience this and also can relate to this experience, because this is very common, especially when you are a content creator trying to get like footage for a video, whether it be a build that you want to try out and, you know, show the audience and stuff like that. Very difficult and very relatable. 100%.
Ended up contributing a lot to the team being able to get down to 1 gen. I eventually ended up holding this 3 gen for so long against people that I just went ahead and abandoned the match because it had crossed 10 minutes and honestly didn't make for very good commentary, because a lot of it was just, where are the survivors? Oh, they're pre-running and pre-leaving and dropping all the pallets, and I'm not able to catch any of them off guard because they're likely on comms together. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it was a very stressful first match to get back into to play the Gideon meat plant, and I was seriously considering not including the game in the video because it didn't have great commentary. It went on for 18 minutes, 10 of which no gens were completed. I didn't get really any downs, and everyone was pre-running and pre-leaving on Gideon meat plant, one of the most boring locations to play on. And so I thought, you know what, this is just one weird specific instance. But then I went into another match on the Dead Dog Saloon, and in this game as well, I could not find survivors for the life of me, and would be missing extremely weird shots, and also had my hit rejected on one of them. That's really funny. I actually hit that. You can tell that the hit was rejected because the sound still goes through, even though it looks like I shouldn't have hit that. And on top of that,
that experience that he discusses is one of the most relatable experiences, I would say, especially as a content creator. Trying to get footage, especially against teams like this, is extremely frustrating. And it overall makes you feel less motivated and less inclined to even want to load up the game in the first place. And I completely relate to that experience. You know, I've gone against teams like that where you just can't find them, and then because they're ratting and because of the killer choice you have, you simply just are unable to find them at all. And that is the one bonus I will say that Ghostface does have, is that because you are undetectable and because you can sneak around, you can also get revealed, which would at least give you at least a chance to see that somebody's hiding and staring at you. But a character like Deathslinger is, you know, very loud, and he doesn't have any stealth perks on, and the only aura perk relies on them actually touching a gen in the first place and actually hitting someone for you to reveal them in the first place as well. He's unprepared with this build, and then he's using a character that doesn't have information, so it makes it extremely difficult, and it's even worse, you know, for Slinger in that situation. Even on Dead Dog, I mean, there's tons and tons of grass, so you can't find most people. If they just don't want to be found in that way, if they are immersed and they're focused on being stealthy, ratty, if you will, if they're focusing on that rat gameplay, it's going to be very difficult to be able to find them, and therefore it makes it less and less interesting for the killer player. And like I've said, just makes it less and less interesting to even want to play the game in the first place. And this is why I've been talking about the topic for a while, that we want to move past the stealth gameplay in that way, and that's why we need to have mechanics to kind of counter those kinds of things, which I've spoken about in other videos. But ultimately, that has got to be one of the biggest issues with the game, I would have to say, can be a lot of the stealthing that can occur, and there's not a lot of ways to counter it, and it is grueling to go up against. Especially with a killer that does not have the capability to have stealth options.
Deathslinger also happens to have a cooldown where if he has a successful hit after an M1, there's a 1 second delay before he can reload again. But if he misses the shot and has to reload back in, he has a 1.5 second delay before he can reload again. So hitting your shots, on that hit, I recognized that I actually had that half second faster reload because the game had registered as a hit, but I wasn't able to pull the Cheryl and buy myself that bit of time that I needed in the early game, and because of the weirdness of the rest of the game, everything fell apart. From here, the survivors were extremely altruistic, aside from the temp named Jane, who left immediately as soon as she saw that the gate was open. And I ended up still getting a 2k because I somehow managed to keep the Cheryl and the Claudette in the game until the endgame collapse came through. And that, again, wasn't a very fun match to showcase just because of how everything ended up unfolding, and I felt like it wasn't a very good showcase of my skills. Although, I did have a couple of nice hits. I had this one really nice long-range one onto the Claudette, and then I had this other great one that went through the railings inside a main on the Dead Dog main, which, you know, there are things that you can do with that. Actually, I had two of them. There was one on the outside railing as well, where this Cheryl thought she was safe to be mending behind the railing, and I taught her a lesson real quick. But this was the second game in a row that I felt wasn't particularly great for commentary, and I was starting to get a little bit annoyed because now I have two games that just weren't all that great to showcase and weren't all that great to put into the video. And so I went in thinking, okay, the third match...
I relate to that experience so heavily. It's crazy to hear about it, but I relate to that experience so heavily. Because, you know, time is not something that everybody's got, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like, schedules are schedules, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. And, you know, if you're only allotted a certain amount of time, whatever the case may be, it applies to anything. Like, when you are only allotted a window of time, if you're only allotted, you know, or you need this thing to get done in a certain amount of time so you can have the time to do something else and whatever have you, you know, matches like these can really set you back, you know, because you're like, well, you know, I don't have what I need for this video for today or for the next day, and it's like, damn, like, I need to take more time out to try to record, and hopefully you'll get what you need. Now, obviously, not every match is going to be perfect, not every match is going to be as bad or even as good as you need it to be. But, you know, it's still relatable to sort of explain that frustration, because it's not fun to go up against, it's not fun to play in as well. And then it ultimately just becomes a time sink for you, because you simply can't get the games you need, you know? And very relatable.
Match will be fine. Third match, we get probably my least favorite Auto Haven map, the Azerov's Resting Place. It's shaped like a dumbbell, and you usually get a 3-gen on one side, and that's what you have to defend as killer. You just defend one half of the map because it has a 3-gen on it, and it's super boring. It gets really boring to play, to just be like, okay, if I want to win this match, I have to hold a 3-gen. Which, in some ways, yeah, that is what you have to do as killer, and I had done that on the Gideon Meat Plant game, but I felt like the Gideon Meat Plant game was a bit more incidental, whereas Azerov's happens to be every game that you play on Azerov's Resting Place, you have to hold a 3-gen, otherwise that map just falls apart completely. It's just the way of the killer. However, in this game, I got another hit denial. I hit him! I hit him, video game! Please! Dead by Daylight, please. I need you to stop giving me this fucking bug. I don't know how this is still a bug. I don't know the consistency or the reason why this even happens. You can see all my PC specs on my Steam or on my Twitch profile. I don't have like a bad PC. I don't have bad internet. I don't know why I have hit rejection here. This has been a bug ever since the Blood Moon event, and that's like that's beyond the point of the problem that I have with DBD, but specifically that I got to this point where I found survivors on generators pretty early because, of course, I heard the repairing of generators, but I turned the corner and looked around for them, could not find a single soul anywhere. I couldn't find them around the corner.
Yeah, there it is again, you know? There it is again. This truly encompasses the killer experience. It does kind of shift depending on what killer you're playing that isn't S tier, but I swear, like, Slinger, hit detection issues. Ghostface, revealed through walls. Revealed through walls. So you're like, oh, good. You know, I love not having my power. Oh, man. Trapper, I don't even know, bro. Like, he explains it better than I can, but ultimately that this is just, it encompasses that feeling, man. It really does. It gives me that same vibe that Azerov video that I had spoken about before also encompassed, which I'll link that at the end of the video, but it really encompasses like that feeling that you get while playing Killer. It's like, damn, like another bug. Well, there goes my ability. Like, I can't play the goddamn game. Oh, good, stealth, great. I can't counter that. Like, damn. Because, you know, tear radius means if I'm near, they hear me. I can't turn it off if I'm not using a stealth killer. So they can, you know, or they see you clear as day wherever they're hiding, and then they will see where you're going. It's a pain, and it sucks.
Corner, I assume they were probably running fixated and were able to hide in locations. I was checking lockers. I was trying to really actively engage in chases, but I was getting stealthed on the whole game. And when I did eventually find an Ada, I didn't want to tunnel her out because I wanted to try encourage more chases with the rest of the squad, but they played really well. They split the map up fine and were in good comms, and even if I was able to try and make my way across the map, by the time that I would have reached a generator that had...
The one thing I will say that when I do encounter a team like this, I usually will just go after that person off of hook, because that's the only way you can try to flush them out, because otherwise they're just going to all hide once again. Like, it basically, they get off hook, they'll hide somewhere, fully heal, you will never see them again. So what I do is just focus them out, so that even if they decide to leave them on hook, I will still walk away with one survivor out of the game at the very least. I'll get one kill. I'm like, hey, that's a win. Like, to me, that's the win, because considering they fought their hardest to never be seen, never be spotted, never be chased, and only rush the gens out, then at that point, to me, that's my win condition. Get somebody out, because it's impossible to counter, especially with the killer like that. Another comparison could be Pyramid Head 2. Like, unless you're running stealth perks, you're not going to be able to hide to try to get them to come out. So I understand the idea where you're like, you know, you want to encourage them, but, you know, when they're playing in this kind of way, they're pretty adamant on staying in the bushes. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to try to come out, and they're not going to try to get chased. They just refuse.
Had a ton of progress on it, the team would have walked away and hid themselves immediately. And so because I wasn't even able to get hits, I wasn't getting any procs of Gearhead, and even if I did get procs of Gearhead, they were probably on a gen on the other side of the map, because I was forced to defend 3 gen on Azerov's resting place. Which I guess kind of goes into the conversation of how the problem that I really have with Dead by Daylight is that the maps are so terribly imbalanced. If there was actually a massive map overhaul...
I've been saying this for ages. Thank you, Shiny Slyveon. Thank you. I've been saying this for ages. Like, holy moly. I've been saying that about Auto Haven and anything. I've been saying that about Azerovs. I've been saying that about all of them. Like, there's a lot of maps that are just massive maps, and there's like just killers like Devslinger who are unable to do anything about it. Like, he moves at a 110 speed. He's even slower than Ghostface. It's impossible in a lot of these situations to make a lot happen. But I'm glad somebody else freaking said it, because holy moly. If they decide to stealth on a gigantic map, good luck finding them. Like, at that point. You need to go in with the right perks, and you need to go in with like that idea that could happen when you can easily go against any team at any point. So you're not ever really fully prepared. It's just ridiculous when you really think about it.
To make them a bit more unilateral across both sides, because Killer has obviously some maps that heavily bias them. Underground Complex is a really small map that killers typically do really well on because of its confusing layout. It's really easy to play around pallets, and it's generally, well, small size. versus things.
If you're talking about Hawkins, I agree to some extent, but disagree on another extent. On one hand, it's like it's a decent map where it's like small enough to be able to try to cut off some people. On the other hand, you also can kind of get screwed over by the amount of pallets, pallet placement, and the fact that some doorways or walls are just not there. Like, there's a lot of the time that you want to cut them off, but there's a door that may not spawn there, or a door that might spawn there this time, but not next time. And that is what makes it a bit challenging, specifically with that map in particular. I've definitely had a lot of times where I would have to take an extremely long route just to go around a certain room, and it would just waste even more time that I didn't have, so it just really would not be fun.
Like Bad M Preschool, which is a massive map that has a lot of guaranteed safe pallets and a really good main building and also a good outer building with the Quentin house that makes it really tough to play around as well. And I think that if there was a bit more of like a unilateral fix in terms of the maps to make them less aggravating to play on both sides, it would be glorious. It would be wonderful. It would fix a lot of the problems that I have. But this game as well, in this Azerov's match, I just couldn't play. I just couldn't make this into a recording because, again, I was defending a 3-gen. I didn't see survivors all game until I saw them like twice, and then I ended up with a 1k because the Steve that I got gave up on Hook and his 3 buddies just left immediately because they're like, yeah, just get out. It's a 3-man out. We'll be fine getting a win. Which, fair play to the survivors, they played this game extremely well, but also, to have these matches all extremely back-to-back-to-back while I'm recording at 4 p.m. on a Sunday feels really crappy. And it's the problem that I have just in general with Dead by Daylight is that your peak hours are usually later in the evening, and those later in the evening hours are usually the hours that I want to stream, but obviously YouTube doesn't like it when people pull games from their stream to put onto their dedicated YouTube channel, so I have to try and find a balance there, and I've just not really been able to do that, along with the bugs, along with some of the maps feeling really miserable to play. After the Azerov's Resting Place game, I was like, okay, I consider maybe one of these games a wash. Maybe I consider the Dead Dog a wash because I didn't expect there to be the last Boonbender and the temp name having Sprint Burst lightweight.
You know, he does bring up a lot of interesting points that I completely agree with, and I relate to that experience as well, and it's really cool to see other creators talking about it. And, you know, hopefully this offers a little bit of insight for those of you who maybe are unaware, you know, about that sort of experience, even, or maybe relate to the experience that he's talking about as well. Yeah, so if you want to watch the rest of the video, it'll be linked in the description. And support A Shiny Slyveon by watching his video. Support this channel with the links in the description, liking, subbing. Also, you can follow on Twitch, watch me play Killer live. But I will see you guys in the next one.